Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today we've got a big comparison. This is probably the most requested comparison I've had for the last 18 to 24 months. This is the WTR Max from Aoostar, and this is the N5 Pro from Minisforum. Two devices released in summer 2025, two NAS devices that are very similar in architecture, two NAS devices that allow you to use your own operating system. And I'll say right now, these are two NAS devices vying for your data and your buttons. In this video, we're going to go through hardware, go through price, go through what they can do, what they can't do, and ultimately help you decide which one you should go for. Look, I'm not gonna lie to you, this is going to be a long video. So if you're in a rush and you're just looking for the salient points, right here on screen, you've got from the article link below details on which of these systems is best for what. It's linked in the description below, but as you can see there, I've broken it down into storage capabilities, AI, noise, temperature, the works. So if you're in a rush, this is the way you need to work out which one's best suited for your needs. But apart from that, let's crack straight on with the video, right? In terms of price and value, there's actually a third device not here on the table, and that is the standard N5. And throughout the course of this video, although I'm going to talk about the Aoostar WTR Max and the N5 Pro, I will be making reference to the standard N5 that sits neatly in the middle. Now that is relevant to this section where we're going to talk about price and value, because at a glance, this device seems bonkers overpriced. You can get the Aoostar WTR Max, or just the Aoostar for the rest of this video, for $699, which is really reasonable for the hardware, storage profile overall, and network connectivity too. Now the N5 Pro is currently around the $1,000 mark on their own website. It's only just been released, so there are some discounts, some early access stuff there, but generally that price for the N5 Pro is going to be about $1,000, which is a huge differential between these two. Now there's a few extra things to add. Number one, the standard N5 is actually around $560 to $580. So it's actually the cheapest of the three. The hardware profile, which we'll get onto later on, is nearly identical to that of the Pro series. There's only two core differences between them. So really it's about how much you need from the device. But at least in terms of money you're laying down, the standard N5 from Minisforum is the cheapest of the three. However, let's talk about design. It's way easier to put a finger on that and nail that down rather than the vagueness of taxation. I'll say between the two of them, you won't be surprised to hear that the Minisforum is the smaller of the two. Not by much, but it is the smaller volumetrically. It's the taller, but in most other regards, it's the more compact device of the two. Also, when it comes to cooling, both these systems feature two rear-mounted cooling fans. If we look at that one there, we've got two rear-mounted cooling fans there. However, although both of them have also got two internal cooling systems with vapor chambers across their CPUs, in the case of the Aoostar, it kind of has that. So in the Aoostar's case, we have this panel here, which sits where the motherboard is, and that has additional cooling. And there's the vapor chamber CPU cooler as well. And those two there on the back draw air over each of the individual SATA bays, and of course, that final bay, which has got those four M.2 NVMe's. Now, when we had them in operation, I'm pleased to say that both of them did exceptionally well in terms of cooling. So much so that I'm not really going to call one out more than the other in terms of their cooling and operation. If they were hit hard of the two, the Aoostar is cramming quite a lot more in, but even then, that kind of counts to its favour, given that the temperatures they were both raising were in the late 40s, early 50s during high-scale operation, was still pretty darn good. Now, talking about that design philosophy there, as mentioned, we've already demonstrated it. Both of these brands have got very unique design ideas in terms of accessing the internal mechanics of this, and that goes down to a PCIe upgrade slot, or the N2 NVMe's, any kind of tinkering, troubleshooting, cleaning, in fact, is a lot easier on this than it is on this. But at the same time, drive installation and access, again, we mentioned it with individual SATA storage bays and the M.2 NVMe's, is phenomenal on the Aoostar there. Also, the Aoostar, you may have noticed there at the bottom, has that LCD panel. Now, there isn't any kind of clear, direct interface for information coming off the Minisforum there, but I will add that LCD panel isn't grey. It looks fantastic, but the way you tap into it with its own internal IP and the software that you choose to use to integrate with it has its hurdles. It's not ideal. So I'm not going to give the brand too much credence for the LCD panel, but I will say between the two of them, aesthetically, I think most users are going to think that the Minisforum is the nicer looking of the two. But I would say in terms of architecture and how it's been put together, particularly in terms of storage, I think the Aoostar has the edge for me. Also, it has ventilation there based on the sides, on either side, on the base, on the rear, around those drives. Whereas the ventilation on the Minisforum, because of that front panel, yes, there's an air line around the edge, but there at the front, we've got the ventilation there, which we're now covering. And we've got ventilation on the rear, but there's nothing on the sides. There's a couple of vent panels there on the back, but I think active airflow for all of those fans is slightly better on the Aoostar. Next up, let's talk about storage, because that's another area in which these two brands have gone a different way. Now, of the two, I think you're not going to be surprised to hear this one's got the better storage capabilities. Notwithstanding, we have 5 hard drive bays and 6 hard drive bays on this one, but this one supports 3 M.2 NVMe's, and this one supports a further 5. There's 4 in here, and you've got a base NVMe as well. Indeed, even the speeds across them, with 2 M.2s at Gen 4 times 1 and 1 M.2 at Gen 4 times 2. This still manages to beat that with more slots and matching those M.2 NVMe speeds there on the Aoostar. But it's not over yet. The Minisforum also arrives with the adapter card here. This adapter card allows you to add 2 U.2 SSD drives, which greatly improves the potential storage capability, which also has down there at the bottom a further M.2. This populates all 3 of those M.2 slots, and ultimately means that if you want the other 2 bays to be used for one for the OS and one for large scale drive, going up to 15mm by the way, with cooling directly above it, there is that capability to choose your own output. And now that Minisforum is continuing their development of that the 6 times M.2 adapter board, which will hopefully, still not heard confirmation yet, arrive for this device, there is still going to be the capability to scale up storage greatly. However, that card will almost certainly be an additional purchase, and mean that even if you did have that 6-bay M.2 NVMe card, it still only has 5 SATA bays. So even with that card, this thing still has storage by just 1 extra SATA bay. Let's talk about connectivity, because there are some give and take elements we need to discuss. Now, let's start with the Minisforum. The Minisforum has a USB Type 4 port there on the front and a 10 gig USB. On the rear, we find an Oculink port there. We have got another USB 4 port. We've got another 10 gig USB 3 port. We've got USB 2. We've also got an HDMI 2.1. We've got a PCIe upgrade slot, and we've got a 5 gig Ethernet and a 10 gig Ethernet connection, both copper. Probably the most flexible of the two, I would say, between these two NAS devices, and it's the easier of the two to integrate into an existing setup there for those migrating away from a legacy older system, and particularly thanks to those copper ports. Now, the Aoostar, on the other hand, has gone a little bit higher in some regards. This arrives here on the front with a USB 10 gig, a USB-C 10 gig, and those aren't in network interfaces. There's also an SD card reader, something weirdly absent from the Minisforum there. And on the rear of the device, we have got a single USB 4 port. We have an Oculink port there, so that's something both of them share, luckily. There is no PCIe upgrade slot, but it has 2 2.5 gig ports and 2 10 gig ports there on the rear. Network connectivity on this is incredible. That is a potential 25 gigabit network connectivity across those 4 ports. Now keep in mind, they are fiber, they are SFP, So you're going to need transceivers. You're going to need to perhaps use copper to SFP adapters. Those little ones, they're about 30 to 50 nicker. Keep in mind having 2 of them in there, it's going to get way too hot. But ultimately, the amount of network connectivity out the box is greater on this one. However, as always, it's just not that simple. That Oculink port opens a real floodgate in terms of debate. What do I mean by that? Well, both of these devices, because they've got Oculink, allow you to use storage expansions. Now, this comes from Aoostar themselves. It's a 4x M.2 NVMe expansion box, and you connect it to one of those available Oculink and USB 4 ports, and boom, you can expand it by 4 more M.2s. There's other things such as eGPUs and expansion PCIe chassis that connect via Oculink and USB 4. Again, varying degrees of bandwidth afforded to it, and that's available for both of them. So where's the area of contention? Well, it's because not only does this device have a PCIe upgrade slot, which is a physical times 16, but only times 4 actual speed, it still gives you that ability to add network upgrades, add low profile graphics cards, very low profile, add expansion cards, AI cards, add more things to this, and you've still got Oculink. In most cases, devices that have Oculink do so because they can't afford in terms of physical space, a PCIe upgrade, and it allows for more compact systems to allow for expandability. Oculink gives PCIe advantages to a non-PCIe physical slot system, but this manages to give you both of them, a rare treat there. Additionally, and this is going to be heavily dependent on the operating system of choice, this device, which arrives with its own operating system on board, that tiny little 64 gig module that it arrives with, supports direct Thunderbolt connectivity. So although you've got a 10 gig copper and a 5 gig copper, so 15 gigabits per second potential, you can connect to this with 2 USB 4 or Thunderbolt 4 devices for direct connectivity, I believe 20 gigabits per second each. That means this, for content creators, for video editors, is going to be hugely desirable, thanks to the software it arrives with, Minis Cloud OS, which is built on FN OS, being able to support that direct feature. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't arrive with any operating system, and therefore, if you try to directly connect, it won't work. You're going to be heavily dependent on the software you choose to install on it, whether you're going to have that feature or not. And we'll talk about the software a little bit more later on, chances are if you're looking at the Minisforum, you probably weren't looking at using their software out the gate anyway. You might give it a try, but you're looking at Unraid and TrueNAS or OpenMedia Vault or Zimmer OS, which by the way does support USB 4 direct connectivity. Ultimately, the advantage this gives you with that USB 4 is very relative and arrives with a bunch of caveats, but it needs to be mentioned. Bottom line, if you're just thinking about out-the-box performance, this has better external bandwidth connectivity available for you. But this has an element of flexibility and accessibility that is definitely worthy of note. Next up, let's talk about the CPU and memory there, because as my wife tells me, it's what's on the inside that matters. And between these two, I will say we do have to bring in the N5 Standard Edition as well, because if we were to look at it just on paper, the CPU in the N5 Pro is the better CPU of all of them. It's a Ryzen 9 AI specialized, the HX 370. We talked about it before. It's got the most cores, got the most threads, got the most capability, the most tera operation per second. It's a better CPU in every single regard. So if all you care about is the most powerful CPU and capability, go for the Pro, and that's the end of the video for you. But the reason we have to talk about the N5 is the N5 at that more affordable price point is actually highly comparable to the CPU configuration inside the Aoostar. So let's flick over to the screen and go through those CPUs in a little bit more detail. So here's the CPU inside the Minisforum N5 Pro, and as I mentioned, 24 threads there. This thing's bonkers. I'm not going to waste your time. It's the best one of all. It's the most configurable in terms of power. It's all fair and well. But when we compare the configuration of the AMD 7 Pro 8845HS inside the Aoostar and the AMD Pro 7255, ignore the 25, there's lots of revisions, the Ryzen 7 255 here, we see a lot of comparable data. So between them, again, you've got 8 CPU cores, you've got 8 CPU cores, you've got 16 threads, you've got 16 threads, you've got a total clock speed of 5.1 when boosted, 5.1 when boosted. However, this is where we start to see the differences. For example, when it comes to the TDP, you can see that it goes between 35 to 54 watts on the Aoostar CPU with the default set TDP at 45 watts. Obviously, it's going to be heavily based on what you are doing and the configuration and the CPU control of the operating system you choose to use. But when we look at that versus that of the Minisforum CPU, not only does it have a lower base default wattage there, but overall a lower when you go between the different states, a lower TDP configuration on that processor there, which on a 24/7 system may be very appealing to you. We could talk about integrated graphics, but frankly, they are near enough identical once again, both rocking out with the Radeon 780M, and because both of them support Oculink, both of them support eGPU support to add even further graphical capabilities beyond that of that total bursted 2.7 gigahertz across both processors. Indeed, even when we look at the lanes across both of these processors, we can see not only have they both got Gen 4 architecture, but they've both got 20 lanes to play with. However, it's that ECC support. The Aoostar arrives with ECC support, whereas the non-Pro one doesn't. And for some of you, that's going to make a huge amount of difference. But I'm not suggesting that you don't use ECC on hard drives. I'm saying if you were dedicating all of your work on hard drive, you're probably going to be less enterprise-minded and less bothered at the price point for ECC. But given if you want ECC on the Minisforum, you have to go for that big old beefy Bofin HX370. At this price point and at this scale, I think a lot of users are going to have mixed feelings about ECC support. It's lovely if it's there, and there's a lot of users that if it don't have ECC, they ain't touching it. But if the difference on the Minisforum side to have ECC support is $400 to $500, I think that is going to change people's minds when you compare it against something like the Aoostar rocking out at $699 with that out the gate. And keep in mind, ECC memory is significantly more expensive at the larger capacities compared with that with traditional. Again, there's going to be people on the other side of the fence as well that say DDR5, as it has on die ECC, which is not the same in my opinion in terms of both inside and outside of the memory, potential for flaws and inconsistencies on data. But still, nonetheless, if ECC support is a big deal to you in line with the pricing, the Aoostar is going to be very, very attractive to you. Whereas the standard N5 model and its lack of ECC support may count against it for you. Clearly, Minisforum have reserved the enterprise scale and support of that Pro Series CPU for their Pro Series device for a reason, creating those two different storage options. And if you're looking at utilizing either of these devices for something like a locally deployed AI LLM, your own chat GPT, your own DeepSeek within the comfort of your own network without any remote access, then the Pro from Minisforum is going to be the most attractive to you. Both of these two, the standard N5 and the Aoostar, both have got that Hawk Point CPU with up to 30 tera operations per second, so they're no slouch. But depending on the peak utility, that's where that Minisforum Pro Series device is going to be more attractive. But ultimately, if what you care about is a good balance between ECC support and CPU capability at that price tag, the Aoostar is going to be the win. But keep in mind that the N5 standard class one seems to have a CPU that's going to be better at power balancing, even if it doesn't have the ECC on board. Now, unfortunately, I've not had personal hands-on with the N5 standard version, so I can't really talk about power consumption because between the two of them, when you've got them set up side by side, because the CPU inside the Pro is a great deal more aggressive, the power consumption isn't really comparable across the board. I could bring up the footage, I'm sure I'm already doing it here on screen, of the power consumption test that we performed on both of these devices for their respective reviews. But still, nonetheless, I can't really compare them. Until I've got the standard N5 here, it's not really going to be a fair fight. But I will say, in terms of noise, that is something we can discuss. Both of these systems have got 4 fans inside. Both of these systems have got a good mix of hard drives and SSD, and both of these systems arrive with massive 280-watt external power bricks. How do they compare on noise? Well, I'll say in idle, the Minisforum had the edge. The Pro Series device was just a tiny, tiny bit quieter in idle, which for a lot of users is going to be the state of this system most of the time, with the exception of you know, whether you're going to be running anything like VMs 24/7 for your cohorts, your colleagues, your family members. However, during active high-end load, the Aoostar was the quieter, which again, isn't going to be useful for everyone. I can only tell you what I saw during my own respective reviews. And again, we're comparing the Aoostar versus the Pro Series version of the Minisforum. But still, nonetheless, this was the quieter in idle, and this was the quieter under active heavy load. Because of the similarity in their architecture, it's very hard to call either one of these systems out in terms of software and deployment. They both did incredibly well with my Proxmox testing. They both did incredibly well with my Plex Multimedia performance, although, of course, transcoding and AMD chips is a debate for another day. Between the two of them, I'll say right now, if you are interested in raw power, the Pro is going to win every day of the week. And depending on how much heavy use you intend to get out of your system, spending the extra $400 or so on the Pro Series device, if what you need is peak power, the N5 Pro is going to be the device for you. But these are NAS devices, these are 24/7 devices, and let's be honest, that means storage. That means 24/7 utilization. And from what we saw and every bit of the specifications from the brands themselves to my own personal testing, this is the superior device for storage. Not only the number of storage bays and the arrangement throughout the whole system, but just ultimately when the system was in operation over extended times and during those peak utilities when you may be running VM environments, when you may be running multiple high-end transcodes, when you may be running huge operations across the system and ECC support out the gate. This, to me, ticks more boxes as an all-rounder in the world of NAS, with this being the more power user. And if either of those statements applies to you, I think this may have helped you choose which one of these best suits your needs. Now on screen right now, you can see the breakdown from my article going through which of these technically 3 systems is best for which purpose. So for example, price or value for money, the N5 Standard Edition is the best one overall. Storage-wise, the Aoostar WTR Max took the lead there. In terms of easy maintenance and design, I think you would agree with me that the N5 and N5 Pro, alongside the connectivity and versatility, earned their points there. But of course, when it came to if you are a fiber long distance user, obviously those SFP 10 gig ports are going to be the most desirable to you, but copper for everyone else. If you're an AI optimized user or want to go for a local deployed AI, the N5 Pro has the lead for you, but both in terms of noise under heavy load and as the best all-round solution, the WTR Max wins both those points. And finally, if you're a power user as suggested, the N5 Pro takes the lead overall. Now, again, I don't know how you intend to use these boxes, and I'm sure there's a lot I've not covered here in comparing these 2 boxes, which, by the way, are very similar. Right now, I've done the reviews for both these boxes and still got to get round to editing together all of the VM and multimedia work I've done on these. I've already lost 2 weeks of time to reviewing these devices, and I've got other projects to look at. So I'm going to take a tiny break on the coverage of these to cover some other things and then come back to these with the multimedia and the VM dedicated videos. Apologies for the delay on that. But thank you so much for watching. Link below will be these individual reviews and other articles and videos over time that I'm going to make, and they'll be linked below. So if it's not live right now, when it is, it will be below in the comments and in the description. Now, if you are interested in getting hold of these, there'll be links to respective stores as well. So if you found this video helpful and if you want to, support this channel and use the links below, please do so. The links to Aoostar and the links to Minisforum themselves, we don't get a commission for. I will include them down there. But if you were going to shop at Amazon or AliExpress and the links there, please use those. It really helps us out keep doing what we do because we get a small commission on those. But go ahead and use their own stores if you prefer. And keep in mind that point I said earlier about tax. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.